Well, welcome everybody. This is our last lecture in the CCOVI Lecture Series for 1819. Today I'm very pleased to present Dr. Antonia Mantonakis. She's a CCOVI Fellow, but also an Associate Professor of Marketing at the Goodman School of Business here at Brock University. Antonia is a consumer psychologist and does experiments on what influences consumers to purchase wine. She's published extensively on the psychological factors that are involved in consumers' decision-making. She holds her PhD in psychology from Simon Fraser University and has been a professor here at Brock now for 13 years. She's excited about CCOVI's new VR/AR Wine Consumer Lab that will be opening up later this year. So you'll have to tune back in and see some additional exciting research once we get up and running with that. So in addition to being a professor, Antonia is also a part-time fitness instructor. She fits that in between everything else that she does. Regularly teaching Zumba classes here on campus, and actually just came here from a class just prior to this lecture. So please join me in welcoming Antonia as she talks about the consumer psychology behind choices.
Thank you, Debbie. I will start by giving you a little overview of my approach to research. As Debbie mentioned, I'm a consumer psychologist by training, so a lot of what I'll be talking about today is going to be influenced by psychological theory, so core psychological concepts. What I like to do in my research is I like to take a marketplace phenomenon. That might be something that is a wine industry question or something that is occurring in the marketplace, apply that psychological theory in order to do an investigation to tap into what's going on. And the way I do that is I will bring that research question into the lab here at Brock to do a study. In some cases, however, we might bring that question back into the winery and do a field experiment. So I'll be talking a little bit about both of those approaches today. The benefits of running behavioral experiments. This is one thing that I want to cover in great depth today. First of all, in all the experiments that we will be discussing today, there's going to be random assignment of people into experimental conditions. And there's always going to be a comparison to a control group. And this is important because this means that we know that the results that we observe are going to be due to the variables that we manipulated and not some other factor. Okay? Because we're always comparing to a control group and we look for a statistically significant difference between those groups. In addition, people in our studies don't usually know which particular variable is being manipulated. And so we know that the responses that we might get from consumers in terms of their choice of the wine or their evaluation of the taste of the wine is not because they have guessed what's going on, because they don't know what other groups there are that they're being compared to. And finally, in all of the studies I'll be talking about today, of course, I'm going to be focusing on the experiments I've done on the topic with wine, but everything I'm talking about today has been replicated with other product categories, such as cheese or even clothing. So these findings, these psychological variables are very robust findings that occur in other areas as well. This is the overview of the psychological stages that a consumer would go through when making decisions. So you see here, first we have the behavioral choice. So this is before a consumer has even taken a sip. They've gone through and made a choice for that wine. So I'll be talking about some of the psychological determinants that are that have an impact during this stage. Next, we have the consumption experience. So here I'll be talking about the influences that are at play when a consumer is actually drinking the wine or maybe in a certain context for consumption that has to do with separate stage from the initial choice. And so I'll be talking about some studies I've done on this stage. Finally, we have the memory of the experience. Now, while this is a very important phase of consumer decision making, it has to do with word of mouth, it has to do with repeat purchase, consumer loyalty. I won't be talking about any specific experiments on this stage today. So what are some of these psychological influences? So I'm going to spend the next several minutes talking about some influences I've discussed at previous CCOVI lectures, and I'll be just going through these relatively quickly. And I will note that all of the studies that I'm talking about today are available for download from the Brock Library or from my website. So first of all, I've done previous studies with several students of mine on the influence of the sound of the name of the winery on consumer perceptions. What we did in this experiment is we brought people into the lab and we randomly assigned them into one of three groups. One group was given a glass of wine. And all the wine is student-produced CCOVI wine, thanks to Andy Reynolds, and so we had a cover story for all of the groups. So for the first group, we gave the participants a glass of wine, and we told them this wine comes from a new winery called, and here's an example, Takis Winery. What you can see here is that the name Takis is a very easy to pronounce name. It has letter combinations that are very common in the English language. Okay, so that's what the first group saw. Second group was given an identical glass of wine, and this is they don't know that they're in these groups. So the second group given an identical glass of wine, and they're told this glass of wine you're about to sample today comes from a new winery called Cellars Winery. Okay, so you can see that that is very difficult to pronounce for English speakers. It has letter combinations that are not common in the English language. And we pre-tested all of these examples, so you can see that they're equal in other respects. So they are both 3 syllables in length. They both start with the letter T. They're both equally unfamiliar to our participants and equally not likable in an extreme way. And so they're matched. And then the third group is our control group. The third group just was given the same glass of wine and told you're about to sample a wine from a new winery, and we didn't give any other name-related information. And what we found in this study is that the more difficult to pronounce winery names were associated with the highest taste evaluations. In fact, these difficult to pronounce names were also associated with a higher willingness to pay. We asked participants, how much would you be willing to pay for a bottle of this wine? And on average, they were willing to pay around $2 more for this difficult to pronounce winery name. So I'm going to ask you all, why do you think this is the case? Why would it be that consumers have higher evaluations for the more difficult to pronounce winery name in compared to a control group? What is it about the difficult to pronounce name that leads to these higher willingness to pay reports? Yes?
Maybe it's the mindset that something that's different could be associated with something old and traditional.
Yeah, okay, so the idea is that it's different, it's unique. Maybe if it's different or unique, it might be something traditional, it might be more old world, it might have some kind of rarity to it. And that is exactly what our theorizing was that led us to this. Because things that are in the environments that are rare are usually more valuable. They're usually perceived as better. And given that reasoning, we expected or we predicted these results. So yes, that's exactly it. Next, I want to describe a study where we looked at the relative fit or match between the celebrity and the associations that celebrity might have. You know, are they an actor, actress? Are they an athlete or sport? Are they associated with? And the associations that those concepts or those ideas, those associations have with a product category. So let's take golf for a moment. We ran some pre-tests, so this is with my master's student, Sarah Clemente. So Sarah had people in the lab, and she got them to list any cognitive associations people had with the sport of golf. People were coming up with things like leisurely, expensive, more for older people, things like that. So people were coming up with, elegant, these associations for the sport of golf. And she did that for other sports as well. Then she asked participants to come up with associations for product categories like wine. For wine, people were coming up with things like elegant, expensive, more for older than younger, and so on. And so you can see that for some sports, there's a lot of overlap or match between the concepts associated with that sport and the product category of wine. And so she found that for sports like golf, there's a lot of overlap, a lot of match. For wrestling, which some people might not even consider a real sport, there was no overlap at all, completely incongruent with the product category of wine, and somewhere in between, so sports like hockey or speed skating, anything to do with skating, somewhere in the middle. And she brought people into the lab and ran an experiment, and she randomly assigned people into groups where they tasted a glass of wine, and the wine was associated either with one of these three categories of celebrity. And she examined evaluations of the taste of the wine, how much people were willing to pay for the wine, and so on. Now, given the categories I just described, we have a close match, a very far off match, and somewhere in the middle. Which condition do you think led to the highest taste evaluations and highest willingness to pay in this? Do you think it would be the complete match, complete mismatch, or somewhere in the middle? So set. Okay, so set says it's probably the match. And you might expect that, right? Because that makes sense in terms of what consumers think about, what consumers are comfortable with. And actually, it's that theory from psychology that led us to predict something a little different. So let me explain. So previous research on what's called moderate schema inquiry in psychology suggests that when there's a co-branding effort or brand association that is very predictable to consumers, so there's a complete match, consumers process it, they can understand it, but they're not motivated to think beyond that because it's too predictable. On the other end of the spectrum, if something is too unpredictable or too much of a mismatch, consumers simply don't like that. They get turned off, they aren't interested. But somewhere in the middle, consumers are intrigued. They are motivated to think about it at a deeper level. And in some sense, to reconcile the thoughts that come into mind to make sense of this association. And because of that cognitive thought process, it's this moderate level of match that leads to the highest product evaluations. And this is what Sarah reported in her thesis. Next, I want to describe a set of studies we ran with our friends at Riverview Cellars, the state winery at the time. One of the winemaker was a Covey grad, Angela Casimos, and they were about to release their new Malbec. And what they did, actually, let me backtrack a second. They had just released a Chardonnay. And it was the same tasting notes and same price point as the previous vintage. And Mike Pelletieri, the owner, decided to put Angela's signature on the back label. And we had some discussions about this. At the same time, I was running some lab studies. We kind of almost didn't know that we each had these experiments going on. And I said, look at the sales data. I'm curious if sales went up. And well, lo and behold, sales did go up. But because this was a naturalistic, we don't know if there was a confounding factor, right? So that was initial evidence, but not quite as strong as if we ran an experiment. So Mike decided for his Malbec to do a tasting event, like what wineries might usually do if they're releasing a new wine. And he counterbalanced the days for which he presented the wine during the tasting with Angela's signature on the label or without. So you can see it's a little faded here, but here's an example of the black label without her signature. And looking at the sales data, he found that sales increased, with the presence of the winemaker's signature, sales increased by 500%. Now this may seem like a very, wow, we should go put our winemaker's signature on every wine, but it's not that simple, because upon closer look and closer inspection of the data, what was discovered was that this increase in sales only occurred for consumers who were local. Only for consumers who were from Ontario. This didn't occur for consumers who came just right across the river in Buffalo. So people who were American consumers didn't seem to connect with the identity of the winemaker as much as the local consumers. And as I mentioned, we had been at the same time doing some lab and online studies to investigate this effect in a deeper way. And we were able to find additional evidence that it really has to do with the shared identity of the consumer and whoever is signing the package. We did some studies with gourmet cheeses, and we ran the studies online. At the time, my co-author was at the University of Miami, so he ran it online with the U.S. American participants and had participants enter what state you're from. So some people said, I'm from Iowa, I'm from California, and so on. And we randomly assigned the participants to either be told that this cheese you're about to view is from either a farmer in Wisconsin, that's the control condition, or a farmer from, and then we put in whatever state that they indicated earlier in the experiment. And what we found was that the presence of the signature only mattered for people who had that shared state identity with the farmer who signed the cheese. So we were able to, through additional experiments, to verify that really this has to do with that shared identity. So this isn't an across-the-board thing to implement. All right, so now I have two more I'm going to go over, but I want to do a little experiment with you all here today. Now we have a big group here today, so this is going to be ideal for my mini experiment. So I'm going to say that you guys are going to be group 1 on this side of the room, and on this side of the room you will be group 2. So group 2, you can just look away, check your phones, don't pay attention for a couple minutes. I'll be focusing on group 1 for the next several minutes. So what I'm going to do, group 1, is I'm going to show you a couple of lines. I'm just going to show you basic elements of a label. I'm stripping away. There's no price-related information, very basic details. And out of the couple of lines that I'm going to show you, I want you to write down which one you think won gold medal. Okay, so you can write it down or just, keep it in your mind and save it for later. Okay, so here are the lines. So here's line number 1. So just take a look here. Line number 1, I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, so now I'm going to show you line number 2. So here's line number 2. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, now write down which line you think won the gold. Okay. All right, group 1, you can look at your phones, look away for a couple minutes. I'm going to test group 2 now. So group 2, if I can have your attention again, I'm going to test you now in your condition. So I'm going to show you a couple of lines, and I want you to look at the label information I gave. Now I've stripped away any price or any additional details. It's just going to be a basic part of the label you're going to see. And I want you to write down on a piece of paper which one of the wines you think won a gold medal. Okay? All right, so here's wine A. So I'll give you a few seconds to look at wine A. All right, and here's wine B. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, so now please write down which wine you think won a gold. Okay, so we have all of your responses now, I think. So for group 1, how many of you chose wine 1? Okay, so it's okay. How many of you chose wine 2? Okay, so all right, I'll come back to that. And why? Okay, wait, actually, let me, before I put that, okay, so, and group 2, how many of you chose wine A? Okay, most of you chose wine A. Okay, and how many of you chose wine B? One of you chose wine B. Okay. So did anyone know what I manipulated in that? Did anyone pay attention? Debbie? The pictures. The pictures, right. So you probably saw that in for wine 2, for group 1, and wine A in group 2. Yes, okay. There was a picture related to the noun in the name. And in both cases, the noun that was in the name is a low-frequency word in the English language. These are words that are not very common. They're not words like apple or cat and dog, right? They're very uncommon words. And what we found in a study that we just published recently is that people are more likely to think a wine is better quality, or they're more likely to think it was an award-winning wine when there's a picture on the label. However, it can't just be any picture. It can't just be a picture of a tree or something common in the environment. It has to be something where the picture helps make sense of the name and what the name means. Okay, so if you see, oh, this is really small here, but Cattail Creek. Okay, there's a picture of a cattail, which is the plant, right? So this is a very uncommon word. The picture of the plant helps make sense of the name. A picture of a cat doesn't help make sense of the name. Okay, cat is a very common, something that's very common in the environment, doesn't really help. So we did a bunch of pre-tests to determine it really has to do with these thoughts and associations that consumers have come to mind to help make sense of these labels that help them determine that it's higher quality. Okay, so finally, another recent study that we just published, this is with another master's student, Reagan Fitzgerald, and Carolyn Hafer in the psychology department, and Tony Bogart. We looked at taglines. Right? We looked at taglines, and typically taglines in the marketplace could be on something utilitarian, so this is like health benefits, or hedonic, so this is about something to do with pleasure, or it could be something to do with emotion. But less is known about deservingness-based taglines. So deservingness-based taglines are things like, you deserve a break today because you're worth it, right? So these are all deservingness-based. So applied to wine, it would be something like, you deserve the best wine, we've made it for you. Well, what we found is that these, when we did an experiment with wine and these 3 types of taglines, people actually liked the deserving, they liked the wine better, they evaluated the wine with higher valuations if it was associated with a deservingness-based tagline. But this was only for people who had a very high belief in a just world. So people who believe that if you work hard, you will get rewarded. Right? If you deserve it, you'll get it. You'll get that reward, right? So it's for those types of consumers. And so that was another study that, instead of something on the label, now we're looking at taglines. Now I've gone over 5 different studies on psychological influences. So for all of these 5 factors I've talked about, what do they all have in common in terms of the wine that's inside the bottle? Sorry, was it? I didn't hear where that came from. Has nothing to do with it, right? It has nothing, I haven't shown you any studies where I've manipulated something inside the bottle. All of these are due to marketing communication. So we call these extrinsic cues. These are cues that consumers use to make decisions that are outside. They're marketing related, but they have to do with communication. Okay? These are things outside. So this could be the celebrity, could be something on the label, could be a tagline. And this is in contrast to intrinsic cues. These are cues that consumers use to make decisions that have to do with what is inside. It could be the varietal, it could be a region, it could be the winemaking process. Right? So these are things that usually can't change once we're at this stage of decision making. Right? But the marketing communication side of things usually are things that we can change or manipulate. So I have some more wines here that I want to show you. How many of you have purchased this? You haven't purchased it?
I haven't, but I know the story.
You know the story. Okay, so a few of you have heard of this story. You're nodding your heads. This is something that I saw. This is from my Instagram feed. So I have seen the buzz about this wine on Instagram, and so I looked it up, and yes, there was a wine writer who wrote about it, wrote about the price, and wrote about the score that she gave it, and there's a lot of buzz about it. And so this is a situation where consumers are using recommendations by others to make decisions about wine. And this is actually a topic of a former CCOVI student's thesis project, Stephanie Dilla. She looked at the impact of awards versus recommendations on consumer decision making. And she was able to get a bunch of different wines from our friends at various wineries here in the region that have either been given recommendations or given awards. And you can see here, they're usually denoted with a sticker or a neck tag. And she ran a lab experiment where she brought people in and she set up a store shelf. And the participants were told, you have this much money, which wine would you buy? And we actually got ethics approval to do a lottery at the end for to choose winners so that the wine that the participants chose, they could have a chance to actually take it home if they won the lottery. So this was a real life choice that they were making. And she investigated, she manipulated actually whether the bottle was presented with its associated recommendation, like you can see here, or if it was presented with its associated award, but not both at the same time. And her results were interesting. She found that awards did make a difference on consumer choices, but only for consumers who didn't have a lot of knowledge about wine. People who had a lot of knowledge about wine were making decisions based on other factors. But people who were more casual consumers, the award really had an impact. Now, as for the recommendation, when we initially looked at her data, we found that the recommendation didn't have any effect. But upon closer inspection, we found that there were actually two competing results happening. There were some people who would know who the rater was and maybe like that person's reviews or like that person's style, and so they would be more likely to choose that wine if it was recommended by that person. Now, on the other hand, some people didn't like who these raters were or who this particular rater was, and so that recommendation actually had the inverse effect, that made that person less likely to choose this wine. So we can see that there are these competing effects, and it was a wash. So you really have to look really closely at that. And so this is a topic I am still investigating, and if anyone has any suggestions or ideas, I would be happy to hear from you at the end of this presentation. Okay, so I've talked about factors on a label. I've talked about factors related to the name. I've talked about taglines, which are a step removed. I've talked about awards and recommendations, which again are another step removed. But today I'm going to focus on a new set of studies that I'm still investigating that takes the idea of extrinsic cues yet a step further away from the wine and what's in the bottle. And before I introduce this topic, I would like to ask you all, what is different today in the marketplace than what the marketplace was like 20, 30 years ago? So what is different right now in the marketplace that didn't exist?
Online shopping.
Online shopping.
Instant communication,
Instant communication on the internet, right? Everything is instant. Everything is on our phones, right? The internet is everywhere. We have apps on our phones. There are websites with product-related information. Google, right? Our phones. Recent research in psychology actually shows that people think their phones are their memory partners. Right? This is everyone has it in front of you. It's your memory partner, right? It's your contacts, it's Google, it's your GPS, everything. You don't have to remember anything because you know that you can look anything up at any time from anywhere with your phone, right? So your phone is your memory partner. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the psychology of online access. Okay, the internet is everywhere. It's convenient, it's non-intrusive, people know it's there, there's an abundant supply of information at all times, and Google is now the third half of your brain, right? So we know this saying from years ago, and consumers know this now. Consumers use this information. Everything is in the cloud, as we would say. And so what does it mean when consumers are informed about this presence of the internet? Or what does it mean to a consumer? Does it make a difference to a consumer if they encounter these kinds of online information sources, or they're made more aware that there are online information sources? Because the internet, when a consumer is in a retail environment, so I'm not talking about online shopping at the moment, I'm talking about bricks and mortar, they're in a winery or they're in the LCBO, there are so many reminders of online information. Could be from salespeople, could be from mobile apps that the consumer has on their phone, right? There are a lot of sources of this reminder that everything is available online today. And so this led us to our research question in this line of work, and this is with my colleagues Rajesh Fargate and Catherine White. We asked the question, how does this increasingly pervasive presence of the internet interplay with consumer spending in a regular bricks and mortar physical retail context? How does this work together? And so what we did for this study is we worked again with our friends at Riverview, Cellars Estate Winery, and we ran some studies with them that are actually very simple. We worked with Mike Pilitary, and we ran this during the Taste the Season event that occurs every November in the region. And so that during this event, consumers purchase a pass, and they go to participating wineries, and they can taste their featured wine, along with the food pairing that they've come up with, and just go on to the next participating winery. So it's an event that takes place, and what we did is we ran different conditions on different days of this event, because it's for several weekends during the month of November. And it was a 3-group experiment. So during one of the days, and this again was counterbalanced across all the days and repeated, they just came in and tasted the wine. We had a food pairing. So this was like our control condition. On an other day, they simply gave a sheet of information with the wine details written on it. And this could be standard practice. A lot of wineries might have a little tasting card or a little note there on the side that's printed for people to read or even maybe take home if they want. And the third group, the third condition, is what we call the cue of the cloud condition. We simply provided that information on a tablet. That was there, part of the tasting bar, it was in the display. Everything else was deactivated on the tablet. The only thing that was present or visible was the wine-related information from the winery's website. So that's all, really this is visually what the different conditions look like. And this is the information that was associated with the wine that was being featured during this Taste the Season event, which is just standard information here. What we measured, we had a little questionnaire that we helped Mike develop that had just standard consumer psychology measures. How much do you feel you know about wine? Scale of 1 to 10. We found in other studies this correlates with objective measures of wine knowledge. And purchase intentions, scale of 1 to 7. These are pretty standard measures. And what the results showed was that there were greater purchase intentions reported under the cue of the cloud condition versus no cue of the cloud. And for the wine knowledge factor, we analyzed the data with and without wine knowledge, same results. So there's no impact of wine knowledge. And finally, when you look at the sheet, the cue of information sheet, there was no significant difference between the results, purchase intention results for that versus no cue. So this seems to suggest that something about cueing the internet, something about reminding consumers that this information is online, makes them feel good and makes them feel like they would be more likely to purchase this wine. Because this was just behavioral intentions we were measuring. So in the next study, we worked with our friends at Riverview to test this a little bit further. We wanted to look at the impact of the amount of information, because you can imagine during a sales encounter, I know some of you have worked in tasting bars, right? So sometimes consumers will ask a lot of questions and you end up telling them a lot of information. Sometimes customers come in, they taste the wine, and that's it. They don't talk. You don't give them any more information, right? So we wanted to look at this interplay of the amount of information and the cue of the cloud. So we have two conditions here that we crossed by the cue of the cloud condition, and we looked at situations where the person is given just minimal details about the wine or a more high detailed script about the wine. Okay. And so it led to a 4-group experiment. So just like before, we had the no cue of the cloud, just low detailed script, which was like our baseline control condition. And next group had the same no cue, but they were given a lot of information about the wine. Okay. Next, we had the cue of the cloud condition, where we had the tablet present, wine information presented on the tablet, and low detailed script given during the tasting. And finally, we had the cue of the cloud, the tablet was present, but a lot of information was given about the wine. Okay, so this is the information about the wine. So similar to the previous study, we just gave some information about the food pairing and so on. All right, so I'm going to show you results for transactions at the winery. And here on the right, you can see this is for the conditions that customers were given a lot of information. This is the high detailed script conditions. Here on the left, this is the no queue condition, and this is the queue of the cloud condition here on the right. You can see that on average, customers were spending over $20 more at the winery when they were given a lot of information about the wine and were simply reminded that all of this information is available online. Okay. Seems to suggest that when consumers are given a lot of information, knowing that their memory partner is there, right, that Google is there, that Google has this information, makes them more confident, makes them feel more at ease about this wine that they're tasting, and they feel more comfortable in buying it. Now, what happens with the low detailed script? So this is when customers are given just minimal information about the wine, and then they're either told nothing further, or they're told, or they're reminded that they can find this information online anytime. What we actually found was a backfire effect. So let's look at the first bar here, which is the low detailed script and no queue, and the high detailed script and no queue. So these are pretty much the same, right? But you see that when they're given low amounts of information about the wine, and then they're told you can find information about this online, people don't like that. People feel like, okay, maybe there's a lot more I need to know, and they don't feel confident, they don't feel at ease like the customers in this group did. Okay, so just to conclude about these queue of the cloud experiments, the effect that I'm reporting here really has to do with the amount of information the customer has received in that retail environment. Okay? If they're given a lot of information in store, then the queue of the cloud has a positive effect. It'll make the customer feel at ease. It'll make them feel confident about the wine they just sampled, and they feel comfortable in buying it. They're more likely to buy it. On the other hand, if in that sales encounter the customer is provided with too little information, reminding them that the information is available online can have a backfire effect. It doesn't make the customer feel good, and they're less likely to buy the wine that they're sampling. And so the practical implications of this is to ask, how does your organization reference the internet in sales encounters? Is there a kiosk? Is there a tablet? Is there reference in discussion, right? So this is an important question to ask in a retail or sales situation. Because the internet is a very rich cue to consumers. It triggers thoughts in consumers' mindset. It triggers thoughts and associations that could make them feel at ease with a purchase if it's done in the right way. And so another way to think of this is to ask, how much information have I given to my customer, right? If I've given only a little information to this customer, probably don't want to remind them that this information is available online. If I've had a lot of interaction with this customer and I've given them a lot of information about this wine, probably a good idea to remind them that they can find this information online as well. Okay. Now, and another way to think of it is which reaction is likely to be activated by the customer, right? If the customer, if the reaction is that the person might feel like, oh, there's a lot more out there that I should learn about because I wasn't told about it right now, right? That might have a negative outcome. But if the reaction that's going to be activated is that the consumer feels confident that they can always access that information anytime, and they feel at ease about that, then it's good to use that queue of the cloud. Right? So this queue of the cloud effect adds to our list of factors that influence the consumer choice of wine, and I've covered some of these today. And this is to add to our growing list of psychological determinants or psychological factors that are involved in other stages as well. I've covered some that are relevant to the consumption experience phase as well. And so just to take away, just to give you some takeaways for today's presentation, I want to just reiterate the advantages of running behavioral experiments. They can be done in the lab or they can be done at the winery very easily, and you can definitely see cause and effect relationships between whatever has been manipulated if you do the proper counterbalancing and random assignment. And that subtle changes in marketing communications can have a huge impact on consumers and the decisions that they make and the amount that they spend. And I've covered some of these today. And finally, that just to reiterate, there are a lot of boundary conditions to these findings. So all of these factors I've discussed, they're not just an across the board, everyone should do them. There are specific circumstances where they work and specific situations where they do not work. All right, thank you. I'd like to thank everyone from my lab and others who helped with this research. Time for questions from the group. Yes.
Hi, I had one. It was about the intention of purpose that you measured in the tasting sheet detail experiment. Mm-hmm. You measured that on them after they left the tasting on their way out.
Okay, so the question, for anybody watching online, I'll just repeat. So the question was what was the procedure for how we did the tasting studies in the winery? We measured behavioral intentions. At what point did we measure those? Were they after they were done the tasting? Was it on their way out? So how it was done was Mike's staff had these they were like little sheets of paper, and the questions were written on those sheets of paper, and they were just at the tasting bar, and the staff would just ask people, we're doing a little study today. If you want, you can participate. If not, you don't have to. And it said on it that if you want to participate, you can hand this sheet in to the cash and get $2 off any purchase today. And the winery, Riverview, so they had like a little store at the front too, so people could buy snacks or souvenirs, maple syrup, things like that. And so it was $2 off any purchase. So it wasn't like, if you buy this wine, you'll get $2 off this wine. It was just more of a general thing that they did. And so we were able to get the purchase intentions or have that measure done around the time of the tasting, not after they left. Yeah. So that's how that was done. Any other questions? Yes.
Okay, so when you did the lot of information and then no conclusion versus the not enough information. I'm not getting wrong with that. But the point is that when people are given low information and then reminded that they will not say anything to the cloud, instead of way that we can maybe track that does the low information that they receive push them to go onto the cloud to see the wine or actually have a negative effect. It's like this is too much and one of the
Okay, so the question has to do with the amount of information given at the winery about the wine, the low detailed script versus the high detailed script, and maybe when they're given a low detailed script, they went and looked for it, or what really is going on there. So I just want to, I'll answer that question by describing a study that we ran with a sleep supplement that we ran, that my co-author Rajesh Varghese, he ran online on Amazon Mechanical Turk. And what he did with the study is he recruited people online, so they participated online, and they were given information about this sleep aid. They're called sleep sheets. You stick it on your tongue, and it's supposed to help you sleep. And he either gave just 2 sentences about this product or 6 sentences. So it was a very clear manipulation of low detail versus high detail. And they ran a study online, so they were just run through it within their browser and not allowed to exit the browser to look up anything. It was just all there. And it was a really new product, so I don't think at the time there was anything online anyways. It was just how much we manipulated there. And we did the Q of Cloud manipulation, where we just did the reminder with a tablet, visually or not, and we were able to replicate the results in that context. So we're sure that it had to do with the feeling of confidence and the feeling at ease based on the low information versus high information. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, please join me in thanking Antonia for a great talk. These different keys that impact our choice really makes you wonder next time you go to change your wine. What else is working behind the scenes here? Also, just a reminder, not only for this lecture, but lots of the other lectures, lots of information in Q of the Cloud. All of the lectures are put online. So if you want to learn more about this information or revisit some of the concepts, all of the lectures are posted online on the CCOVI website. So thank you again, everybody here today and online for joining us this year for the lecture series, and we will see you next year in 2020.
Thank you.